Can't, I don't know what this is here. Let me see.
This one for the
Just a minute. Yeah. Can't mute you yet. Hold on.
I hear the congregational church bell.
That would be me. How
I
you
had a
doing?
feeling.
Good morning, everybody.
Here you go. And this is for today.
Kathy, it looks to me that I see everybody other than Dawn and John. Is that correct? Glenna, can you hear me? You're muted.
Hi, Ken.
Hi, Kathy. I show everybody here other than Dawn and John Trudell. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, then as we have a quorum, I will call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Community Preservation Committee to continue our hearings. As a preliminary matter, this is Ken Bogrand, Chair. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda and present can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Neville?
Present.
Jack?
Present.
Mark?
Present.
Linda?
Present from New Hampshire.
Tim?
Present.
Diane?
Here,
I see you there. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Glenna? Present. And Kathy Richen?
Present.
Present. Good morning. This open meeting of the Community Preservation Committee is being conducted remotely pursuant to Chapter 20 of Articles of the Acts of 2021. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. And this meeting will not feature public comment, only comment from the invitees to the meeting. For this meeting, the Community Preservation Committee is convening by video conference via Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public might join in.
and John
Please note that
Trudell
this meeting
just
is being
joined us.
recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, the chair will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, question, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so only through the chair, taking care to identify yourselves. With that, I think we are ready to move to the first item on the agenda. And the first item on the agenda is the presentation from the First Congregational Church in Nantucket for historic preservation for the request in the amount of $84,571. As you have all been here before, you understand that we give you about 10 to 15 minutes to, in fact, flush out your application and then open it up to us for up to 10 to 15 minutes to be able to satisfy any questions or comments from the committee members. We have allocated a half an hour to this presentation, and then we go on to the next presentation, which is also yours. So that would be procedure. So I'd like to formally start and invite you to start your presentation with respect to the first application and identify yourself and the members of your group to us. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Ken, Mr. Chair.
You're muted, Brooke.
I am. I can hear.
Okay, now I can hear her.
Okay. Can you hear me, Ken?
Yes, I can now.
Okay, great. Excuse me. A little frog in my throat. My name is Brooke Moore, and I'm currently the treasurer and chair of the Buildings and Grounds Committee at First Congregational Church. I'd like to introduce our group. We have, under the moniker First Congregational Church, we have Reverend Gary Klingsborn, our senior pastor, Janet Schulte, our moderator, which is the head of our lay leadership in the church. And then also with us today are Bethany Oliver and Justin Cherney from Theater Workshop of Nantucket, who are the folks who currently occupy the Bennett Hall building we're talking about with this application. So I wanted to say first that it is with great gratitude that I come to you and our group comes to you today, both for the commitment that you've given to the entire community in all aspects of what the CPC does, but in particular because of your longstanding commitment to helping First Congregational Church maintain and preserve our historic campus at the top of the hill downtown. And stewardship is a term that's used in religious communities about our responsibility as a congregation for the buildings and resources that were entrusted to us by our forebears. And in our case, these buildings date from 1711, 1835, and now this building will get its first preservation easement from 1936. The First Congregational Church prides ourselves on being a community church and a resource to the community, both in facility and in human resources in all aspects. And Bennett Hall was originally constructed and named for Fred Bennett, whose vision was a community center for the town, a shared space. And as you read in your packet, this building has been used over many, many decades by many, many different groups and communities for community events over time. And when I talk to folks, when I do tower tours, I like to remark that imagine a time, I point out all the churches in Nantucket and I say, imagine a time when all of these churches that have 300, 400, 500, in our case, over 650 seats available were filled to the brim with congregants who were supporting financially these buildings. And that's obviously no longer the case for us and the other church groups on Nantucket. And without CPC support, we just could not do what we do and preserve our buildings in the way we're able to. So I wanted to just read one little section of one of the articles. One of the fun things about putting together this application was there's a lot of information in the historic archives of our newspapers and the Inquirer and Mirror in particular about the history of Bennett Hall. And I just wanted to read this little section. Bennett Hall was constructed in 1936 under the pastorate of Reverend Fred Bennett as an addition and parish assembly to the Congregational Church. But it has become more than that. It has become a veritable community hall, a place where public gatherings have been held, where an interdenominational spirit is manifested and where basketball games are played during the winter months between local and visiting teams, where young and old gather in a feeling of true comradeship and with the right community spirit. Although attached to the Congregational Church building and to the historic vestry building, Bennett Hall is looked upon as a community building as well. Nantucket is fortunate that it exists. And that history, I think Jack Gardner, you might remember using it in different ways from how it's used now. And
Right.
but what we're really proud of is the partnership we have with Theater Workshop. Theater Workshop has been in operation for a very long time on Nantucket, and in the 1970s, the building they were in burned to the ground. And First Congregational Church welcomed them into Bennett Hall on a temporary basis, and then the church was turned into a permanent theater. And we are proud and thrilled to host Theater Workshop and to have a long-term lease for them so that they have a consistent place to do the work that they do in the arts in the community. And I'd love to invite Justin and Bethany to make a couple of remarks about the relationship between the congregation and the work and the theater and how important the building is to them.
Sure. I'm not sure that Pastor Bennett had any idea that he was building a theater right back then, but we're sure happy he did. And you all would be surprised that a basketball court and its sprung floor makes for an awesome stage for dancers, etc. But as Brooke said, we are an institution. We're 65. We're celebrating 65 years this year of the Theater Workshop of Nantucket, and I think that it actually just makes a beautiful marriage that we have ended up in such an institution on the island. I love pointing to from the ferry and saying, "Oh, that tower right there, my theater's right next to it." But it is a lovely relationship. I think we've been in a more formal relationship for the last 8 seasons with the First Congregational Church, and working with Gary and Brooke has been fantastic for us. And we're just interested in continuing to make it an inviting space and hopefully, continuing to reach out and broaden and bring our audience back as this has been a complicated moment. But I think that I would say we're humbled to have this space. I mean, we all know what it's like to be on Nantucket, and theaters are not aplenty on this island. So it's a really magical space to get to come into and create on this island. I'll send it over to Bethany in case my magic talk didn't cover everything.
No, I mean, everything you said, Justin. And Brooke, those were such lovely words that you read. And I just wanted to say that it's such a special place that the community continues to gather in a different way. And what an important thing it is for us to have a stable home for the theater that's, been here since 1956. And that we're very happy to be there, and that I can attest that the repairs are much needed. And we just want to stay there in this inviting space for many years.
Thanks, Bethany. I will point out that we planned for this, and then when that huge storm hit, I got a text from Bethany at about 9 o'clock at night, and one of the failing gutters, water was pouring in a back window in the backstage area, and we were like, okay, the time is now. The time is now for this project. So I'm just going to quickly review the financials of this. The project cost is total cost is $104,000, and I know when I've come to CPC in the past, these historic preservation projects always have a lot of uncertainty in the financial projections. And so I structured the financials of both our applications this year to segregate out the parts that are for indeterminates and contingency, the unknowns as it were, knowing from my past experience that CPC is not allowed to finance for unknowns and contingencies. So I structured the financials a little bit different. And so the way we talked about it in our finance board is that we would be requesting obviously the lion's share of the cost from CPC, but the church has committed $20,000 of our own funds for this project that will cover a portion of the known estimate cost, as well as be prepared to cover any indeterminates and contingencies that come up. And so the full cost, potential cost of the project is fully funded with the request that we've made of you today. And I think that's it from us, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Gary and Janet, did you want to add anything before we close our presentation? Okay, so there we go.
Thank you, Brooke. Now for questions from any.
Can
of
I
the-
have one
of the
comment?
committee.
Can I
Mark.
have a comment?
Yes, Mark.
I'm somewhat compromised in my support of this project because my mother and father were married by Fred Bennett quite a few years ago. I was a former president of Theater Workshop and have been on the stage in Oklahoma, Pirates of Penzance, and Pinafore. So I'm all in Bennett Hall. So I'm a fan. It's a great community service to have a theater that's it's so nice and so convenient to right in town.
Thank you, Mark. Other questions or comments with respect to any other committee members? I can't necessarily see you all. So
Okay,
Neville,
Me,
Ken,
Neville,
Ken?
I'll go after Neville.
I would like to, I would just like to say that I am a member of the First Congregational Church, and I've done a lot of theater at Bennett Hall. And so I'm just making that as a public declaration. I think it's a very good project, and I think it's very worthwhile. Thank you very much.
I have
Thank
a
you,
comment,
Neville.
Mr. Chairman.
Linda, please.
I think there's only a couple of us on here. Jack, maybe Tim, you're old enough now. I remember watching basketball games from the catwalk while the basketball was going on down at the bottom back in the early 70s. And I too was in all the theater productions with Mark, and as well as a bunch of others. And I think it's a worthwhile project. I'd like to see Bennett Hall continue. As it is. I think it qualifies for historic preservation. Thanks.
Arts Makers.
Diane,
Yes, I've been on that stage a long time ago. I've been making costumes a long time ago. And I think it's a great thing. I think the floor, which was first time I ever had been on a basketball court floor, but it was great. And we used to put chairs in. It was very informal and it was always full. And I think that we are cutting out so many of our things that we had down to zero. I think it's so important to have the theater go on and be in good shape. Thanks.
any other comments from any of the other committee members or any questions relative to the financials as opposed to the project itself from any of the committee members?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
John?
Actually, it's a question for you. I definitely think it's a worthwhile endeavor. But I'm looking at just the financing, which I'm very happy to see that roughly 23% is going to be supported by the congregation. I do have a question for you. If any kind of oversight, construction management of the 15% contracting fee has any bearings on something that we could award, and the contingency of 5%. So we're looking at roughly 16,700 and change. Is that any concern with our board when we vote on the total amount of funding?
Well, I'm not sure what you're referring to that, because the only thing I see in here is the project oversight and construction management fee of 15%, totaling $12,372.
Yes, and then below that, I think there's a contingency of.
Yeah, but
5%.
but below that, those are not included. Those are excluded as Brooke.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Brooke indicated that those were excluded. And I
Okay.
think the oversight and construction management fee is
Right.
usual with respect to it, because it's not a contingency, and it's something that's necessary in order to be able to make sure that the
Sure.
project goes forward on team. Based on my reading of what we're allowed to do, it is my belief that that is allowable within the scope of what we can award money for relative to historic preservation restoration projects.
Great. Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions with respect to this particular application?
Ken, Can I make one quick remark in response to John's comment?
Absolutely not. Of course.
John, I just want you to know that the project team that's working on this has brought in $3.5 million of restorations to our buildings in the last 8 years on budget, with every last one of them. So while I appreciate the question of whether it's allowed with the CPC, I can tell you it is invaluable to us. I know a lot of things, but I'm not a historic preservation expert. And this team has brought great success on our tower restoration, our summer church restoration last fall, which were both funded by the CPC, and then the lower level restoration that we did that was fully funded by the church. That was over $2 million, and all of them came in on budget with this team. So that guidance is not only invaluable in knowledge, but in financial savings as well. So
Thank you. Okay.
mhm.
Okay, I have scanned as best I could all of the people that I see on my screen. And I do not see any other hands up with respect to any questions as to this particular application. Is that correct? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Then with respect to this application, Brooke, I want to thank you. And rather than wait 10 minutes to the next start time, have you start with respect to the second presentation that you have relative to the Old North Vestry Preservation Project, and know that you have a little bit of extra time that you've given yourself in terms of the way we've dealt with the first one. So please start again, and let's move forward.
I'm just going to note that Bethany and Justin are going to sign off as this project is separate from their work. So
thank you, Bethany and Justin.
Thank you.
thanks for
letting
coming.
us be here.
So on to the Old North Vestry. So I want to talk about this project in terms of its place in the queue of major projects. I just sort of summarized in my response to John the recent history of our investments in our buildings overall on our campus. And exterior envelope preservation has been our #1 priority, along with the self-funded restoration or excavation under the Old North Vestry and the creation of meeting space and community space beneath the Old North Vestry. That was that $2,200,000 project that we executed, fully financed by the church. And that project had both historic preservation components that we didn't even realize in terms of shoring up the foundation of the building we're talking about in this application. So our congregation has had some very, very deliberate focus on bringing our buildings up to the best condition they could possibly be in the last decade. And as you can imagine, that's been an enormous investment on the part of our congregation and the CPC and the community at large since I've been involved, which is about 8 years. We have been looking at this Old North Vestry interior. If any of you have been to an NCMC concert or Christmas Eve services or anything else that's happened in that building, it is impossible not to see what we're needing to do in there. The paint is peeling from the walls, the plaster on the ceiling is cracked and patched. And we had initiated some efforts on this before I came to the church, and the realization that this was a very important and critical historic preservation process that required very specific methods of preservation made it a much more costly effort than anybody had anticipated when the congregation started digging into this. And so when we got estimates 2 years ago, we were or 2.5 years ago, in the $250,000 range, that was not inclusive of some of the things we've included in this application. We had a decision to make. We had a deteriorating trim at the top of the exterior of the summer church, and we chose to apply for and do that project, which miraculously was executed flawlessly during the pandemic. And so now we turn to the interior of the Old North Vestry. And it's a complex project, both in terms of methods and logistics. We have our church worshiping in that space 9 months of the year. We have a Brazilian congregation that worships in that space 12 months of the year. And the pews have to be removed from the space to have rolling scaffolding. And so it's an interesting logistical challenge that we have worked out with all of the groups that use our building are prepared for this project to happen next summer. And we're very excited about it if in fact the funding comes through and we're able to do it. So, First Congregational Church has always, as I said, been a community church. Our buildings, in fact, this building served as the courthouse in its original decades of use. It was a town building as well as a church building. And it continues to be that under our stewardship. And I know you guys have seen the letters, but I want to read one paragraph from our letter of support from the Community Music Center, which reads, without the partnership and support of First Congregational Church, the NCMC would lack valuable performance space for our community choirs, ensembles, and students. With the support of the CPC for much needed repairs and rehabilitation, the sounds of community music will continue to ring from the Old North Vestry for another half a century and beyond. And I was in doing some office work this week, and there were 2 young people practicing piano and taking Zoom piano lessons on the amazing piano that we have in the Old North Vestry. And those things go on all the time in that space. We have AA that meets in our parlor 5 days a week. And I can't even begin to count the number of groups that use the space. So I'm going to let Gary and Janet speak a little bit now. You've heard a lot from me.
Mr. Chair, Gary here, Gary Klingsborn. I appreciate what Brooke just emphasized about the community use of this space. When I came to the church in 2010, Bennett Hall, the theater was dark. That was in a time of transition in leadership here and at Theater Workshop. And so one of the joys and challenges that I have faced with leadership is to resume that with Bennett Hall, but also in terms of the Old North Vestry. We have loved being a community church, even though that's a space we worship in the wintertime. But all of the groups that have been in there, the doors are always open, and we feel strongly about being a community church. And so that space has been used well, I think, in that regard. And we're excited to be able to continue to do that. Right now, we've got paint and things dropping from the ceiling and the walls. So we want to be really careful to address that now and begin to get it resolved. Thanks.
Other comments from the Congregational Church team?
Yeah, I'd like to just comment that there's a plaque in the Old North Vestry that talks about where it was originally located and how it got moved once and then moved again. And it's always a great instruction to visitors to the church and visitors to my day job to help to explain how we reuse buildings out here. And I think it's one of the best examples of a visual presentation of historic preservation by the relocation of buildings that we have on the island, because of this tiny little small plaque that's in that building that tells so much about what's important about our architecture on Nantucket.
Thanks, Janet. Any other comments before I open it up to the committee?
I'm just going to repeat my comment about the way I've structured the finances of this. And just to say that our request is an odd number, $317,296. The balance of that basic construction cost of just under $25,000 will be covered by the church. And we've also allocated another $35,000 to cover any contingencies and unexpected costs for a total of $60,000 commitment from FCC coffers. So with that, I think our presentation is done, and I'm always happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Brooke and Gary and Janet. Committee members.
I have a comment.
Linda Williams.
I forgot to say earlier that I'm a member of the Congo Church, longtime member.
By the way, for anybody, being a member of a church does not disqualify you in any
Right.
manner, shape, or form from voting on this, nor does being an actor or a performer at a theater disqualify you from acting or voting on this when we get to that.
I
Sorry,
know that.
Linda.
I just wanted to make that comment. I forgot that. I've been concerned about the state of the vestry for quite some time, because you can sit in there and look at the paint peeling and all the sort of quiet disintegration that's been going on for quite a few years. And I think it's time that we address that, given the historic nature of that structure. I mean, it's just a magnificent room.
Thank you. Other comments, questions from commissioners?
Ken, if I may.
John?
Mr. Chair, I guess this is a couple of questions or comments, one directed for Brooke. Brooke, of the monies that the church are committed to putting towards the project, 60,000, I noticed in evidence of potential lenders, the church has a line of credit of 150,000. Does any of the monies that are being committed towards each of the projects come from that 150,000 line of credit, or is that something separately?
No, these are assets we have committed from the congregation already. The line of credit has been used as a cash flow source because of the CPC reimbursement process. So it's probably not even going to be necessary to use it for these projects because we have this $80,000 that we've committed to use for cash flow. But the money has to be spent before and it's sometimes up to 6 weeks before we get the reimbursement. So we've always had a line of credit just to manage that cash flow situation on major projects.
Thank you. And I guess something that Linda brings up a lot. We have an unprecedented amount of requests this year for, I think, about 9 million, of which we have 12 applicants. So funding is going to be very tight this year. And I think for historical preservation, we have 7 applicants, totaling just about $2 million. Given the importance of this, is there a timetable? Is there a separation of, part of the project that could be done first, second, third, assuming that we can't give 100% of the funds? Is there a priority?
I anticipated this question, and the answer is it would be nearly impossible with the logistics I referred to earlier for us to split this over 2 time periods, because the pews have to be removed to get to the walls and ceiling and floors, obviously. So splitting this project over 2 years would be, it would be costly, first of all, more costly substantially, because you'd be getting, the scaffolding and stuff twice rather than once. And logistically for our partners in the use of the buildings. The church is committed to this project, and we will do our best to find a way forward. It's important. We've been waiting a long time, and we really want to see this move forward. And we have, folks available and ready and scheduled, available to do it next summer. So as much as I'd like to say, yes, we could do the walls one year and the ceiling the next year, the logistics of this just don't really work that way in our buildings. It's a challenge for sure.
Thank you.
I appreciate the question.
Mark?
Yes, Brooke, along the same lines, given our constraints this year with limited funding and lots of requests, could you tell us maybe which of the 2 projects, Bennett Hall versus Old North Vestry? And I love them both dearly, but if you had to choose one, and we may end up having to choose one, so could you help us there?
Yeah, I understand. We also anticipated this question, and I would say for us, the Old North Vestry is probably the more critical in terms of having access to the specialists that need to do the work, who may or may not be available 2 years from now or a year from now. And I do believe we could do some temporary fixes on Bennett Hall if it were necessary to wait a year.
Thank you. Thank you.
Obviously, we'd prefer not to, but you know, I realize you can't split dollar bills in half and spend them the same. So
Questions from other committee members?
Mr. Chairman, Savarino.
Tim, please.
Brooke, I would just like to thank you and your team. Your applications and your thoughtfulness in your presentations pretty much take away any questions that I would have. And I always look forward to seeing you before us.
thank you. It helps not to be the first time at the rodeo.
Yeah.
Brooke, I have a question for you. One of the criteria that we need to meet is to ensure that the preservation that you're doing is in accordance with the standards set by the Secretary of the Interior relative to particularly interior historic preservation. And so I'm just wondering whether or not that is part of the work that has been or will be done by your consultants in order to make sure that the work is done within the criteria as is defined by the Secretary of the Interior.
150 to 200%, yes. Penn Austin was involved in the original scoping of this work 2 years ago. Penn has, my understanding, has opted for some time off, taking a little bit of a break, but we work very closely with Preservation Trust and will have experts on site consulting with our contractors on all aspects of this. And it's interesting, sort of a fun little anecdote. One thing that came out of this assessment was that the color of the trim and in the church is sort of a, I don't know, for lack of a better word, it's a bit of a yellowish, not mustardy, but anyway. And the painting contractor said to us, you do know the building is going to speak to you about what color this ends up being. This is not going to be your choice. We're going to be scraping down through all the layers of paint and determining what the original color of this church was. And we will be restoring it to whatever color that is. And I hope your leadership understands that the building will choose, not you. And I loved that. I think it really speaks to, and our leadership accepted that without hesitancy. And I think it speaks to our commitment to make sure that that the correct methods and choices are being made to make sure that when people walk into this building, to the best of our ability, obviously things change over time. You know, organs weren't around in 1711, but we do take very seriously our commitment to follow appropriate methods.
I think that's really an interesting comment because I know the people at the UU Church understand exactly what you're talking about because the final color that was selected, as your consultant says, was selected by the church, by the walls as opposed to by the congregation. So
yeah.
Mr. Chair.
I can't wait for the
Gary?
surprise.
Yeah, just a quick comment on that. You know, when we evaluated the ceiling part of the Old North Vestry just a few years ago, within the last 5 years, you know, our leadership, some of them had hoped we could just go up and just paint that again, you know. And the preservationist said, no, you've got to cut down through all those layers or it's all going to start coming down. You've got to get back to the original. And that's Brooke's point. So that makes it more expensive, more time consuming, but it also preserves it historically in a more accurate way. So we're glad to take on whatever that needs to be.
thank you. Any other questions or comments from anyone with respect to this particular application? I do not see any hands or hear any voices.
So do we get bonuses for short presentation? Just asking.
Well,
Anyway.
if you could have promised that, see, then we could have in fact scheduled the other
Scheduled it.
people, so scheduled it, but but you do get bonuses for quality, as Tim pointed out. The fact of the matter is that having anticipated many of our questions and having had experience with us, you've addressed some of the concerns which make it more difficult generally for us to be able to value and judge and rate each of the different applications for us. So we absolutely do appreciate that.
Well, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for having us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Right. Well, thank you. And Glenna, I presume that are the people from the Landmark House available?
Yes.
They are. Oh, fantastic.
Great.
Can you also then, Glenna, give Hillary a call and indicate to her that we might be ahead of schedule
Yes.
with respect to her? Okay.
Thank you
then
all.
Thank you all to the people from the Congregational Church, and Glenna, if you will let in the people from the Landmark House, that would be terrific.
They're here. They've joined us.
There's me.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
You guys were here a couple of years ago, so I think you know the drill in the sense that we gave you 15 minutes to convince us that you're honorable and that we should be doing something appropriate. And Ellis, Smile, and Steve, all of your good work has not gone unnoticed. And so we're very happy to have you start with the presentation. Take 10 or 15 minutes, expand on the presentation that you've made, and then you'll be open to questions for us once we have moved forward with that. So if you're ready, please start.
Sure. Good morning, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to meet with you this morning. We have this year applied for a grant to restore the shingles on the exterior of our entire building, which is the Landmark House, plus the addition that was done in 2001, plus the front stairways, which are a beautiful curvilinear dual staircase leading up to the original front door. They're very bad repair at the moment, unfortunately, and will take a considerable amount of money, obviously, to restore. So we added that to our shingling grant proposal. We've just finished, or about to finish, the project that you funded for this year, which was the restoration of all of the trim and downspouts, etc., with that new material AZEC, which we had approved at the HDC. So that should last for a very long time. We're pleased with how that looks. And we do believe that the shingling's about...
Hi, Hillary. This is Glenna Stokes-Scarlett calling from the Community Preservation Committee.
Glenna, go on mute, please. Go ahead, proceed.
Sure. So the for those who are not familiar with the Landmark House, we're affordable housing for low-income 62-year-olds or disabled individuals who will live on the island. Not necessarily islanders. Oftentimes we have people who apply who are family members of islanders. We support 24 people in one-bedroom apartments, and we're able to add some extra funds from our endowment fund to support the operations of the building, etc. But oftentimes it takes considerably more money to extend to restoration projects. Hence the reason we're sitting here with you. And we would appreciate if you would consider our proposal.
Steve?
Ken, I don't know if did you get to see the cover letter that accompanied this application?
I did, and we circulated it.
Oh, I did. I'm glad you did that. Thank you. I just, again, want to express our appreciation for just how easy it's been, frankly, to work with you folks. I think we have a track record now that proves that, like you, we have the best intentions for the residents here at Landmark House. The Grossman Wing opened in 2001, and that was obviously had all new shingles on it when it was constructed. They are 20 years old. I don't know, frankly, how old the shingles are on the main building, but I've been on the board since 2001, and nothing has been done on the exterior shingles since I've been around. So I'm guessing those shingles are pushing the 25-year mark. which is kind of a criteria for thinking about replacing them. We sent you some photos. They're starting to curl. They're getting thin. They get weather beaten, especially on the harbor side. So we think it's a great idea to go ahead and schedule this as our next piece of improvements and restoration to the building. If you've driven by, I hope that you've noticed how much fresher and cleaner the exterior looks since we've done all the trim. We know we put in 145 new windows. We put in new shutters around all the windows. So we're very pleased. We have a new roof.
Thank you.
So the envelope, both aesthetically and structurally, has been improved tremendously. And we think this is, I don't like to say the final step because we might be back again, who knows?
We
But
would like to say the final step.
this is an important step that we'd like to undertake in 2022.
Open the floor to questions from committee members. I can't see everybody.
I'll jump in and Mark Beal here.
Mark, thank you.
This is a project that might be conducive to doing it in phases if we had to. Just for you all to know, at Landmark, we're under quite a bit of pressure this year. We have a lot of requests and limited funds, as we do every year, but this year was a lot of requests. And some projects are very difficult to phase in, and others we could do a phase. So this project, we might have to ask you to do one wall or two walls. And would you be receptive to that kind of a proposal?
I believe so, absolutely. The only thing that we have to consider here when we do any work on the building, Ms. Field, is that we have to be aware of the residents' comfort. That's a condition that HUD and rural development imposes on us. So doing phases, we're absolutely open to, and we certainly could do that. We would just have to keep in mind that we have 25 homeowners here who may object to how the work is done, but it's our say at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think as a practical matter, if we had to accept phasing, the perfect world would be to do the Landmark House main house in 2022 and do the Grossman wing in 2023, if need be. And that way, the residents in each wing are only impacted once. So that would be.
To follow up, Ken, I don't believe we can commit for future years. So the phasing would be, we can or pay for two walls, just for instance. And then we can say reapply for next year for the next two walls, something like that. Well, I don't think we can commit ahead.
You're absolutely correct, Mark. We can only commit with respect to, but I think one of the things we'll request at this is for you to get to us by the end of this week, a proposal as to how you would split it up if we were looking at the suggestion that just you made with respect to funds for the Landmark House and then funds for the Grossman wing, and then your sense of priority as to which one is more important in terms of doing first.
Okay.
And to follow up, I can't believe we would not be receptive. And again, I can't speak for the committee, but I can't believe we would not be receptive to, if we did suggest this year to phase it, that the following year we would look pretty favorably on your application for the next phase. But
Right.
No one can promise that.
Right.
Yep. We can easily comply with that request, and we'll break down the budget into probably three pieces. One, to reshingle Landmark House, two, to reshingle Grossman wing, and three, to restore the front stairway.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, just as a comment.
John, yep.
I just point out something that everyone's already aware of. When you break down in phases for a large project, costs tend to go up. So if you're looking at the following year and the following year, there's a construction crew that sets up shop, and if they have to break it down each year and start over again, costs will rise. Also, I know this year in particular, white cedar shingles, especially the grade A white cedar extras, were they were not available. So you'll see that the cost per bundle is $82. I remember when that used to be in the 30s. So I would anticipate in phases the prices and project costs to go up. And again, we might not have any choice in the matter to look for phases, but I'm just pointing out the obvious that everyone should take into consideration when we view other projects. And thank you.
Great point.
Other questions or comments from committee members? And if I don't see all of your hands, so don't be afraid to speak up.
I think Diane's on mute.
Oh, I'm
Go ahead, Diane.
Can I ask, are the front stairs being used now, or are they in such disrepair that they're not safe?
They are not safe and not in use, but they are largely decorative, Diane. They're not a means of egress. They're not a required means of egress. They do access the caretaker's apartment. So he is the only person who would use them. Residents would not use them for anything. That was the original front door, but
Yeah, I've known the building as HCC. It's a very important building.
Yes.
On Orange Street, being that they're going, they're thinking of putting low-cost housing across the street.
That's right.
Which is hard. So I want to be sure. And on the main building, the front is brick, right?
No, it's all shingle, Diane.
Well,
yeah.
Okay, so it's all shingle. And so which walls would you choose to go first?
We would do the walls on the harbor side, because those are the ones that are weathered most and most susceptible to weather, obviously. So that's how we would start for sure.
Right. I was thinking that the harbor side would need to go first. It's the one that takes the worst care, and I think the windows came out very well.
Yeah, they do look great. Thank you.
I wasn't sure about using that material, but it's worked out.
It's going to be fantastic for us in terms of maintenance. It's just going to really allow us to, not have to think about that and focus on other projects that require our attention. Obviously, a building this size constantly has something needs help.
That's a good. All right, I just wanted to know which wall you would start with and what those stairs did, but I think it's important to keep them and not lose them.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
And Ken, just an anecdote about the phasing.
Yep.
This present project started in June, I believe. And the present project, which was replacing the trim and the gutters and all the existing fascia. I got a report from a resident through a grapevine, and her comment was, "When will this project ever end? All we hear is hammering and ladders, and when is it ever going to end?" So I'm just commenting that while the phasing may make sense financially, it's not going to be a popular plan as far as the 24 residents who live here.
Again, totally doable.
Yep. Other questions or comments from the committee members?
I just have one comment.
Linda?
I think it does fall under historic preservation. It's an historic structure. It was moved in from Pulpus. It was the almshouse. I have plenty of pictures of it, the NHA. And it pretty much looks exactly the same way as it did when it came in. And we need to preserve it.
Thanks, Linda.
I agree.
Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, then I want to thank you, Ella and Steve, for a thoughtful presentation. By the end of this week, if you could please send an email to Glenna with respect to your suggested timing and distribution of the financial aspects of this, fully understanding the comments that you made with respect to, obviously the desire is to have the all done at once because of the issue with respect to the comfort of the residents, but also a half or a third of a loaf is better than none. And so just want to make sure you understand our issues as well, right? Yeah.
Great. Thank you so very much for your consideration. We do appreciate it. Landmark is looking a whole lot better due to your kindness. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And
you.
you can depart if you'd like. And Glenna, would you invite the next group in for us for their hearing? Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
They're actually not ready until 10:15.
Okay, it is 5 minutes to 10. So you have I'll give you 1, 5, 10, a 15-minute break. If everybody comfortable with that, and we'll reconvene about 10 minutes after, just to make sure that we're all together. Okay. So
Okay.
put yourself on mute or turn your video off and do what you'd like.
Okay, I see at least 5 of them, so I'm going to admit them now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Good morning, Hillary. Glenna advises that you have invited 9 people to be part of your presentation.
Yes, so we have Georgia Raisman, also from the Historical Commission, and Mickey Rowland from the Commission on Disabilities, who will be presenting from the organizing group. We have people from the Preservation Institute Nantucket, Cleary Larkin and Kim Rose, who will be leading the discussion of the digital scanning and conservation and analysis of treatment of trees. And we have guests from Simpson, Gompertz, and Hager, Matthew Bronski and Christian Schoberg, who will be leading the discussion about the parametric modeling and design. And we have Glenn Bornasian and Bob Miklos, who will be present to answer questions. They are working with Penn on the design and identification of historic materials in the streets.
Of your commission members, I'm concerned to make sure that you don't violate the open meeting law with respect to the number of commission members on, because of the fact that there was not a posted meeting. So what is your quorum? And so therefore, how many can you have without violating? Pardon?
Yes, we have a quorum of 4 people, and we have 3 people from our commission on the meeting today.
Okay, thank you. Glenna, are all the committee members available now?
I don't see anyone else in the waiting room. I've admitted everyone who was there.
Okay, thank you. Well, since this is your first time before us, the way that we work is that we give you 10 to 15 minutes to flesh out your presentation with respect to the request to the committee, and then we open it up for about the same amount of time for the committee members with respect to questions. Because of the fact that we're ahead of schedule a bit, there is a little bit more time available this morning than it might normally be the way. So I would very welcome you, Hillary, and the people that you have with you, and have you start out with respect to your presentation, fleshing out the request and any additional information that you and your team want to provide, and then be ready to be able to take on questions from the committee after you've fleshed out your presentation. So you have identified all of the people that you have here, so I'll be happy to have you begin and start your presentation.
Great.
One other
thank
thing is just to have everyone else who's not speaking be on mute so that we don't get a lot of reverberation. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and share a presentation that we've developed. Just move this into presenting mode. Great. Can everybody see the presentation? Looks like pavement. Okay, great. Well, first, let me say thank you so much for receiving our application and inviting us to come and present to you. We're going to tell you about the project and how we hope to tackle this very important and very complex problem on the island. So this project is called the Main Street Restoration, Rehabilitation, and Accessibility Plan. And it's being brought to you by the Nantucket Historical Commission and the Nantucket Commission on Disability. Today, we're going to introduce the two commissions. We're going to give you an overview of the project. You're going to hear from our partners who will be joining us doing the work and advising us from the town. We'll do some wrap up and have some time for questions. We're going to start with a description of the Historical Commission because we are a newer commission, and my colleague Georgia Raisman is going to talk to you about that.
Good morning, and thank you for listening to me. Can you hear me? I expect you can. I unmuted myself. As you may know, preservation is undertaken at 3 different levels, at the federal, state, and local level. On the highest level, the Park Service does what you see here on the chart. It maintains the Register of Historical Places, gives us technical assistance and guidance, and provides funding via grants and tax incentives, as you probably know. On the state level, we have the Massachusetts Historical Commission, which is the state preservation officer and archaeologist. It maintains a statewide preservation plan and recommends sites for listing on the National Register, and also provides funding for preservation via grants and tax incentives. It also does project review and compliance, what you might know as Section 106, typically, Section 106 reviews. On the local level, that's us, the Historical Commission. We were reconstituted, I will get to that on the next slide, 2.5 years ago. But what our purpose is on the local level is to do local presentation planning, help local presentation planning. We do surveys of historic resources, and our role is to help advance local presentation planning by that kind of survey, by advocating for preservation here on Nantucket, for working with the Massachusetts Historical Commission when there is a Section 106 review, as we would have done in the Milestone Road situation had we existed at that time, by supporting the MHC in finding a determination of historical significance when that is important. We differ from the HTC, who has an enormous job, as you all know, which is to maintain design guidelines and like building with Nantucket in mind, and to do architectural review, demolition permits, and things of that sort. As you may know, I think we're going to move to the next slide, Hillary. We were reappointed in May of 2019. We consist of 10 members, 7 regular and 3 alternates. We've been meeting every month, and we have an extremely valuable staff liaison, Holly Backus. In the last 2.5 years, we have met monthly, and we're happy to report that we have a number of significant achievements. One of the most important is that we received certified local government status from the National Park Service. That enables us to be higher in line for grants that will help us further our activities. And in that connection, we got a grant, and we applied for and received a $26,500 grant from the Massachusetts Historical Commission to survey Nantucket's historic resources, which will be the first survey done in that area in over 30 years. Another project that we're very happy with is that we envisioned and created the Arthur Cooper Memorial with the Land Bank and with the the Museum of African American History. I have a frog in my throat, sorry about that. That just opened this past August. I saw a number of you there. It was a beautiful and moving event to have it opened, and a good thing for Nantucket to be furthering the history of our local communities of color. We've also partnered with NAREB for a class that will be coming up in the spring. I think a very important class, helping real estate brokers better understand the sale of historic homes. We've been assisting the town of Nantucket by advising on various preservation and historical issues. And most important for this particular project, we have been studying and advising on historic streets and pavements, cobblestones in particular, for nearly 3 years. I think you may remember the whole thing that may have precipitated this situation in longer than 3 years ago, when the proposal was to plant cobblestones on asphalt in Upper Main Street. So we are in our attempts, we're trying to get the town to help. We're trying to help the town figure out how best to maintain historic streets and maintain historic pavements, and thus maintain a character of Nantucket that is something quite different from a fake historic site. It's a real historic site that's been living and breathing for 300 years. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mickey Rowland. You know me as I'm on the Nantucket Commission on Disabilities, and just as a sort of a review of what we normally do on the commission, the commission serves as a resource for the town, businesses, and individuals on anything to do with disability issues. We also administer local disabled parking permits as a convenience for the residents, and we advocate for access, mostly by reviewing and commenting on variance requests to the Architectural Access Board when local businesses can't quite meet the requirements of the state access code. Back when I first joined the commission about 30 years ago, the streets in the core district were mostly inaccessible for wheelchair users due to the lack of proper curb cuts and crosswalks. We petitioned the town to provide annual funding to slowly correct this issue, and for the most part, the curb cuts and crosswalks are in place. But there is still quite a lot to do regarding the irregular brick sidewalk surfaces. Main Street is the heart of our historic town. Improving the sidewalks in a sensitive way will be a tremendous benefit to everyone, but the populations that have the most to gain are the disabled and the elderly. It is literally dangerous for many people to walk the sidewalks of Upper Main Street, especially in the area by the Three Bricks. And that area is completely inaccessible for anyone using a wheelchair. So this is why the Commission on Disability is so interested in seeing this project completed in the best possible way. Thank you.
Hillary, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I'm glad someone told me. I imagine that many of you have taken a stroll down Main Street sidewalks relatively recently, and you're very familiar with the condition there. There are a lot of special conditions. So in the lower right, you see these large flagstones that are being pushed up by tree roots. On the left, you see these granite slabs that have these carved channels. They're historic. They were put in place in many instances by the people who built the homes in the 18th and 19th centuries. These blocks that you see they're actually not accessible because they have a grade change of more than 1/4 inch. So that has to be managed and accounted for. On the upper right, you see a tree root that is moving into the pavement, and the pavement has been removed to accommodate the tree root. But then you can also see how there's different materials. So one of those flagstones is a new machine cut stone. The other ones are older. So there's a real mix of materials of different levels of value and different levels of condition. And it's been a priority for the town to fix the Main Street sidewalks for a long time. It's the most historic street in the town. It has the highest concentration of historic pavement, and it's very busy. There is the Homestead up on Upper Main Street, which is a community of elderly people. There's also museums on Main Street. But as you can see from some of these quotes, people, what is it? Is it impossible? Is it improbable? Or is it just in need of a new approach? This quote in the middle, unfortunately, no silver bullet exists to solve this dilemma. No one would argue against increasing accessibility on Nantucket, but the good intentions will dramatically alter the street as we know it today. And this is this is a statement by someone who lives on the street. Another person said, no matter what the consultant says, in the end, nobody will agree. And someone else said, quite frankly, the end result is a quagmire. So is this problem even solvable? It's definitely difficult, and Mickey's going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges.
Yeah, the challenges are relatively clear, and Hillary's already gone over a little bit, but I'll just quickly review the historic material, the variety of different paving materials, such as the stone slabs of varying sizes, adds to the complexity. The MAAB standards, the Architectural Access Board, meeting the standards for slope and grade changes will be very difficult in some areas and may actually require variances from the state. Very unique situations. Every section of the sidewalk has different issues, so each area will require very specific review. The tree roots, we all know that's a big issue. No one wants to harm the trees, so how do we accommodate the roots while maintaining the historic materials? And a low tolerance for change. The objective is to fix the problems without significantly changing the historic character of Main Street.
So what we're proposing and what we really want to communicate in this presentation is that this project seeks to create an actionable plan, an actionable design. While we will be surveying historic materials in the street, we will also be resolving conflicts, coming up with methods of treatment, so that we turn over at the end of this project, if we're lucky enough to have this funded by this committee, we turn over to the town a plan that they can actually turn into construction drawings and implement. So this is a restoration plan and a rehabilitation plan. We are going to be using as a starting point the Nantucket Preservation Trust Historic Streetscape Survey, which was funded by your committee and is underway. We're using that as a foundation, and Kim Rose is present and can speak a little bit to how these two projects differ. We are going to be setting accessibility goals that are they're actually responsive to the goals set by the state, and setting preservation goals and making sure that our plan achieves both of these goals. And importantly, this project works in 2 public meetings and develops tools to use in those public meetings so that we have an interactive public process that builds consensus with these stakeholders. People feel very passionately about this street. Everybody applying for this project feels passionately about this street. Building buy-in and really harvesting the great ideas of the public is part of the goal of this project. Just to review the project area, it's a little bit less than half a mile. It starts at the Pacific Club and moves up Main Street to the Civil War Monument. They're 2 very different areas. One area is commercial and has less historic material, and one area is more residential and has a lot more historic material. They have different characteristics. We included the commercial area as well because we are going to be digitally scanning and building a model of the street. And so it just seemed like we should do the whole street. We'd have economies of scale in doing that. And Mickey can talk a little bit about some of the priorities for the Commission on Disability of commercial Main Street.
Well, when the north side of Main Street was redone several years ago, one of the, not only did we get a much smoother sidewalk surface, but we also gained access to several shops on the north side. specifically the drugstores, and possibly another one and a couple others on that block. The south side has similar issues. It's the service is really irregular. It's very wavy and up and down. And the shops that have created access to their stores have really sort of modified the sidewalk in an irregular way to get, steep access into them. And I think that by including this section, we'll be able to smooth out the whole area and really fix those little individual pieces that have been altered in ways that really don't conform to the whole street. So there's a big benefit to doing that section also.
So our approach is to begin with surveying, to move on to analyzation, and then to actually design. We hope to explain to you why this is such a complex problem. And we want to tackle that complexity with sophisticated tools and a comprehensive design. We've broken the project up into 6 different phases: digitally scanning the streetscape, constructing the parametric model, assessing the existing trees, and doing that with consulting parties, specialists in trees, and assessing the material conditions in the street, identifying new supplemental materials that are appropriate. They might be salvaged materials, or they might just be new materials that fit well with the existing materials. Identifying different treatment solutions for ramps, for changing the grade of the sidewalk when you have a tree present, for interacting with the immovable fixed conditions of the sidewalk, the limits on curb height, on foundations, then an interactive public design process, and producing the design schematic. The complexity of the project requires an interdisciplinary team. We're really proud of the group of people that have been interested in working with us on this project. It's an all-star team. I do want to say that the Historical Commission is part of the town of Nantucket. This project will be subject to procurement regulation. We'll be working with the procurement officer of the town to follow all procurement guidelines, which I think should help this committee feel even more comfortable that this is going to be money well spent, because it's going to be subject to that additional level of competitiveness. That being said, all of the folks who are going to that helped us develop the proposal, will be working with procurement, and we're very comfortable that they'll be competitive and terrific partners who've done great work for the town in the past. So you'll be hearing from Cleary Larkin. Cleary is the director of the Preservation Institute Nantucket, a group I'm sure you're all very familiar with. Cleary took over from Marty Hilton, and Cleary is also the acting director of the Historic Preservation Program at the University of Florida. She has decades of experience as a practicing architect, working in urban areas and working with historic preservation. Kim Rose is the co-director of the Preservation Institute Nantucket. She's leading the current project for Historic Streetscape Survey. And Kim is residing on Nantucket as well, so she's boots on the ground. Glenn Bornasian founded Integrated Conservation Resources and Integrated Conservation Construction in 1987. He's a specialist in architectural conservation, and he's a material specialist, and he's going to be leading the documentation, analysis of current condition, and sourcing of supplemental new material, and making recommendations about the handling of the material in the streets. Dave Shampoo is someone, our tree warden of Nantucket. You're familiar with Dave and Ben. We consulted them with them while developing this project. We have another off-island arborist as well, who's a specialist specifically with urban trees, whose name is Bill Logan, who also has an interest in being invited into the project. Matthew Bronski has worked with the town and the Historical Commission for the past few years, specifically on cobblestones. He leads the preservation practice at Simpson, Gumpertz and Hager, known as SGH. He is an architectural historian and an engineer. Matthew started his career as a pavement engineer with the Massachusetts Department of Transportation and then went back to school for preservation. He has a particular knowledge base around historic pavement and a passion for historic pavement. He was the recipient of the prestigious Rome Prize, and he studied historic streets in Rome. And he's going to be joined today by a colleague, Christian Schoberg, who is a specialist in parametric modeling. And Bob Miklos with Design Lab. Bob lives in a historic Greek revival home on Nantucket. His firm Design Lab is a specialist in institutional historic preservation, working on prestigious projects like the Boston Athenaeum. He's also been an active participant in Envision Resilience and in the Coastal Resilience Project on Nantucket. And he's has a particular skill with leading public meetings and working with the virtual public meeting format to get a lot of consensus around some of the resiliency work. So I'm going to turn this, oh, wait, I have one more slide about the team. We had a thought that this is a project that needed to be done and that would be a great project for CPC funds. But we didn't want to go ahead and develop the project proposal unless we knew that we had support from important people in the town. Chuck Larson, who's the special project manager for town of Nantucket and the former head of the DPW, has been a key advisor for us. Chuck is sorry that he can't be here today. He had a conflict, but is certainly available to answer questions offline that committee members might have. Holly Bacchus also had a conflict and wasn't able to be here today, but she is the preservation planner of the town of Nantucket and the liaison for sidewalk work on Nantucket as far as ensuring the historic integrity of the sidewalks. And Dale Gary is the tree specialist with the Department of Public Works and would be a key advisor regarding the trees. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Clary to talk about the project.
Thank you, Hillary. Good morning, everyone. I'm Clary Larkin, and I'm really thrilled to be here. This is my first Nantucket activity as new acting director of PEN. So thank you, Hillary, for the invitation to participate. I wanted to just quickly say that PEN turns 50 in 2022. And we are really excited to be considered for this important project to mark the next 50 years of our partnership with the Nantucket government, with organizations and residents, and to continue building our new partnership with the NHC. So we're really thrilled to be here. This photo, I think, really exemplifies the work that we do during our program to train the next generation of heritage specialists through applied research and community-based projects that really help to document, conserve, and manage Nantucket's historic, architectural, and cultural resources. In addition to the team that Hillary just mentioned, we also have Dr. Sujin Kim, who is shown in the slide on the left. He's our director of Envision Heritage, which is our digital documentation lab. He was actually just up in Nantucket last weekend, as you see here, using a terrestrial laser scanner and his panoramic camera for the current Historic Streetscape Master Plan project. We also have this long-running partnership working with Glenn and with Bob. The photo on the right is actually, I believe, from 2010, which is when Glenn was leading materials conservation classes for our PEN students. And we've been working with Bob Miklos for the past 3 years, developing the resilience and urban cultural landscape projects for the PEN students to learn through, including the Washington Street project and collaborating on the Remain Nantucket Envision Resilience Challenge in the spring. In addition to that, we really understand the importance of cross-disciplinary collaboration. So we look forward to working with SGH on developing and using the parametric model. and with the arborist and the tree wardens on ensuring the health and safety of the trees throughout our design process and recommendations. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give a quick overview of the scope of work, and then we can answer more detailed questions that you may have during the Q&A session. The first task is digitally scanning the streetscape. This is led by Dr. Sujin Kim, where he will use the 3D terrestrial laser scanner and photogrammetric techniques to document the existing sidewalk, curbs, street level, appurtenances such as tree pits and utility covers. He's already done a lot of existing scanning along Main Street to document the buildings. And so we'll be able to coordinate the previous scans with this new data. His deliverables will be providing this data in a point cloud to SGH to help develop the parametric model of the existing conditions. He will also be providing us with drawings for use in the field to map material conditions. And we'll be working with him to determine areas where we need more photogrammetric level of detail to understand surface details or material layouts. Task 2 is SGH's scope of work, constructing the parametric model. They'll tell you more about the detailed version of that in a minute. But it's really a great value to this project because it's a design tool that we can all use to study the accessibility and materials of the sidewalks on Main Street. Task 3, the arborist will be determining the conditions of the trees and providing a strategy toolkit for the project. And we'll be taking that into consideration as well when we develop recommendations and schematic design. During this task, Glenn Bernasian will also be leading the existing conditions assessment. So this will be a series of assessments along the length of Main Street to determine typical situations, materials, and really to provide a detailed survey and conditions report on areas that require restoration, treatment options, and materials recommendations. Glenn will be providing a final recommendation report for the materials conditions assessment. Task 4 is proposing treatment solutions. This is really a collaboration between Bob and Glenn, myself and Kim. We'll be using the parametric model for schematic design process, and this will really be following those MAB accessibility guidelines that Mickey mentioned. And I should say that these tasks really, they're listed task 1 through 5, but they're really a collaborative effort going back and forth between tasks. So they may be happening concurrently or going back and forth, but it's really an iterative process of collaboration that ensures that the schematic design, the accessibility, and the materials recommendations to retain the historic character of the street are all integrated, and that this project is implementable to meet the stated project needs. Bob will also be leading 2 community meetings. He'll be providing an overview of the project and receiving community discussion and input in the first meeting. And then the second meeting will come towards the end of the project, where we're demonstrating the model and the schematic design, as well as providing discussion on restoration recommendations and receiving community input. Lastly, the final deliverable will include a materials conservation report with recommendations for restoration, repair, and rehabilitation, 2D drawings of the proposed scope of work for the materials, and the parametric modeling of the schematic design proposal. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
Hillary, I would like to interject at this point in time. What we're hearing from your team is an incredibly detailed approach to the proposal moving forward. And looking at the time constraints, I think that I certainly feel that I've gotten a really a good understanding of the depth and scope of the skill sets that are involved with this project, assuming we go forward. And so I'm just wondering whether or not there is anything critically in terms of the overall scope that we need to understand, as opposed to going into the significant detail as to each of the level steps at this particular point in time. But I will be subject to being corrected by the rest of the committee in terms of their thoughts as to whether or not from this point on, unless there is something really critical from the next parts of the proposal, in view of the time, whether or not you feel you've done enough to have us understand the scope of the project, so we can then get back to you and start asking questions.
Well, we'd love to give you a demo of the parametric model, since it is such a big part of the, but it's, we're here to give the committee what the committee wants to hear. I think we've been talking for about half an hour. So, we'd love to at least show you the model.
Well, why don't we do that, and then we'll go to the questions from the committee.
Yeah. Christian and Matthew.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, my name is Christian Schoberg with SGH, and just really quickly take you guys through just kind of what the concept of parametric modeling is, how we use it at SGH, and how we hope to apply this to the complex problem that we have looking at nearly a half a mile of public right-of-way here. So parametric modeling is really just a methodology for designing, for dealing with complex problems, and it basically involves writing the instructions for solving a problem versus manually solving it many times or in many locations. And once these instructions are defined, you can automatically update the model in response to changes in input. It's great for looking at lots of options or responding to changing conditions. We can go to the next slide, please. So for example, this is a project that we worked on in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where we were looking at creating this public park space with overhanging cable systems. And we provided a parametric model to the architect in this case that allowed them to vary the geometry of these conditions and look at what the effects would be below grade at the varying utilities that they were worried about having clashes with. So this is a way of modeling that allowed them to continuously update their design, not have to worry about those types of clashes, or be able to quickly evaluate the changes and how they would affect those below grade utilities. Next slide. Once we've got these kind of models set up, we also use them to analyze many different versions of the same model against each other. And this is something you commonly hear the term optimization kind of thrown around. This is really what that means, is looking at many different options within a system of a limited sort of feasible design range, and evaluating them against each other to find the best solutions. So in this case, reducing or increasing the structural performance by about 50% in most of these categories. Next slide. We also use this during the design process to evaluate things like slopes or volume of concrete, so that the design can continue changing. Next. And so we think that this approach is great for a lot of reasons. It's rules-based, so we can apply similar logic in many locations. It allows us to quickly look at different options. So that makes it interactive, which is great. Helps people understand what's going on in those kinds of situations. We can avoid a lot of manual modeling. We can respond quickly to changes, and we can manage the complexity of many different locations and many different conditions. Next slide, please. So for this project, we're thinking of
Christian, sorry, given the committee's interest in moving to Q&A, let's just go right to Matthew to talk specifically about why we're choosing parametric modeling for this particular project, and then we can go to wrap up in Q&A.
Sure. So in all the examples that Christian just showed, you had a lot of different variables at play, and you had some complex underlying computer programs that were written and kind of joined all those different variables and performed analyses, like structural analyses, to translate something like what if we have a cable here? What if the cable's higher or lower? How does that translate to a stress, which then translates to a footing size, which might run into obstructions on below grade pipe. So here you also have many different variables that all affect each other in different ways. And if you change one, it affects the other. So here we've just shown what some of those many variables are. So property and building entrances on Main Street, that's obviously an issue. And we talked about kind of steep slopes up to try to make a shop accessible for a wheelchair. The longitudinal and the transverse slope of the sidewalk, both have ADA requirements. High tree roots become an obstruction to the accessibility or passing those areas. And obviously we don't just want to eliminate that variable by cutting down the tree. We want to save these elm trees, the gutter slope, the crown of the street, the height of the curb. So all these really have a maximum or a minimum or a recommended based on various rules like ADA or good street design practice, the crown of the street, and even meeting curb cuts and things like that. So, the way these projects often go is there are just so many different variables at play. If you're calculating it out manually, everything ripples through. So designers often tend to change as little as possible and just try to eliminate some of the worst offenders that don't work well. And then that's the solution. So really the beauty of the parametric model is computers are a lot faster at calculating a lot of possibilities faster than humans. So by writing in all the rules of what this can or can't be, what minimum maximum slopes are, just with the click of a cursor and moving through, one change would just ripple through the entire half-mile street. So it's an incredibly powerful tool to allow for us collectively and all the stakeholders and users to look at what are the best possible overall solutions to kind of balance all these things. And if you're working the street and the sidewalk at the same time, that also enables possible solutions that you couldn't look at if you were just dealing with one or the other separately. So raising or lowering the entire street slightly or sidewalk slightly are all on the table. So it's a really powerful tool. And by enabling us to chase through that all the more quickly and to have a rapid response tool, it enables, I think, the public to provide more informed input and really see what all the possibilities are.
Thank you, Matthew. We do have the model in here, or the budget in here. That's also in your packet, so we can refer back to that during Q&A. But just to wrap up and then move to Q&A, we really hope that we've communicated how this project will produce an actionable design for restoration rehabilitation of this important historic resource, and that fixing the sidewalks is a high impact community project of interest to thousands of residents and visitors. Main Street is open to everybody, used by everybody. It's open 24/7. It really doesn't get more used as a community resource than a public street. Accessibility and pedestrian safety is a town strategic goal. Historic pavement, streetscapes, and trees are important character defining elements of Nantucket that we need to look after. And the situation requires a level of attention to preservation and community consultation that is best met by a specialized project, taking everything into consideration with all of the different people with the talents necessary to get the job done. So in closing, we believe that walking on public sidewalks and enjoying the beauty of historic Nantucket should be a safe experience for everyone. And we believe that together we can do this. So thanks very much. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can move to questions and answers. I can always bring the presentation back up if we need to refer to it. Thank you very much, everyone. Ken, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee?
Ken, if I may.
John?
Number one, thank you very much for the entire group that's spent some time this morning. This looks like it's obviously a multiple year project, not just going forward after the actual the deciding on the design methodology. I think you make a really good point. People tend to look at buildings, historical buildings, and they don't necessarily take into account the streetscapes and the sidewalks and how equally important they are to the overall historical landscape. So I think this is a very worthwhile project. I guess my only thoughts are, and they're not concerns, they're just, is there an estimate of how much for actual costs? There's a considerable amount of street to look at. How much actual costs, how long the project would take, how many years? And I guess when it would be, you mentioned getting this together for information for the town. And as great as the town is, we don't necessarily work in really fast schedules. So any of all those thoughts, have you thought about that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, John. So we don't have an estimate for what it would cost to actually do the repair of the street. What I will say is that I think it's been challenging for the town to progress repair of this street because of how complex it is, and how strongly people feel about it. And I think there is a high belief on Nantucket that, we're managing okay, and what if it gets worse if we do something? And so it seems like, hands off, don't touch it. And at some point, that's just something that we have to overcome. And we think that this project will make it easier for the town to be able to do some work. I really can't comment on how long it will take the town to do this, but the town has many, many more projects than they can do. And our view is that the sidewalks are an extreme concern. And if we do this work, it's going to make it easier for the town to be able to pick this off when they have the capacity to do things. So when you think about, well, what makes a project possible? What are the elements that need to be in place? Well, you need to have financial resources to do the work. You need to have the labor to do the work. And then you also need to have the implementation plan and the understanding. I think with Main Street, we know that the town puts aside funding for sidewalk repair every year, and they've actually been unable to spend that money. So it's not been so much the financial resources. I know when I spoke with the then director of the DPW in 2019 about the project to improve sidewalks in town, I was told that he had $4 million already allocated for sidewalk repair, and that the town wanted to give him more money. And the problem was, being able to actually program the projects. So the money is significant, but it's not the gating problem. Labor is always a challenge. I think the biggest challenge, however, is the implementation plan, and that's what we really want to tackle. When we have the plan, the town will be able to work on it bit by bit. So they might say, all right, we're just going to work on the worst part right now, and we're going to do that this year. So in other words, I'm sure you're right, this will be a multi-year project. There will be times when cobblestone repair is going to be necessary, and that will be an ideal time to do some of the sidewalk too. That's something, we had $500,000 of cobblestone repair done over the summer of 2020. They did a couple blocks of Main Street, and that would have been a great time to tackle the sidewalks too, if we'd had a plan in place to be able to do that. So now we want to put that, we hope to do this project so that we have all three of these tools, the money, the labor, and the implementation ready to go when the time is right, whenever the town decides to do it.
Thank you. Neville?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's important for us to understand that Penn has been working in this capacity on Nantucket for quite a while. And I'm very glad that the NPT has taken a hold of this. I think this is a very important thing. They've been doing it consistently over the past few years on Nantucket. The implementation plans, especially one as involved as this, is very, very, very important for us to have. So I think this is a very worthy project for us to support. I think you are continuing something that I know that Penn started, and I know that we did not get a chance to see all of the geometrics of the plans, but I know that if we understand exactly what you are doing in doing this virtual, showing how doing a virtual survey as to like what needs to be done and or how it's going to look, I think it's very important, and it cuts out a lot of things. Like for someone like me, a regular proletarian, like a consultant course that may go into hundreds and thousands of dollars for the town. I think we can simply just go to this website, which I know this is all going to be on, and see what needs to be done and do it. Thank you very much.
Other questions from committee members?
Hi, I have one if I might.
Yes, Diane.
Over the course of time where the streets have been changed with the former DPW head, which is in front of Macy Lane warehouse, which we had agreed to thing and it was not done properly. And in front of the Pacific Club is another place where it was put in. As Hillary knows, I am very concerned about the main street going up. And I would like that maybe the two commissions could at least talk about how it's going to look. I think the trees will not be touched. And I don't know how
Sidewalk
much,
will be,
I don't know how much one can change the state laws about the tip of the sidewalk and how it drains and the pipes. But this is a monumental take on job, and it will take everybody working very hard. And I think it's a good project, but I think it has to be handled very carefully. That's it.
Ken, I have one question.
Mark, go ahead.
Yes. One thing I'm confused about, if this project is as important as you make it out to be, and there's $4 million of sidewalk repair money, why wouldn't the town be funding it?
So this is a restoration plan. It is a municipal property. And it is a broad public interest. So because it's preservation, historic preservation, it's also related to open space. It's related to a restoration. And it's really beyond the scope of what the town is obligated to do. We felt that it was an appropriate project for the Community Preservation Act funds.
Hillary, I have a question that I'm really confused as I read through this project, and hopefully you can provide an answer. The project, the presentation identifies the team that is going to be working on this project, but also as part of the presentation, you indicate that you have to go through the process of meeting the minimum wage and the request for proposals. And so I'm trying to understand how that can be done where you've already identified the team, but you haven't done an RFP with respect to candidates to be able to provide the help relative to this, to suggest that this can be an independent decision with respect to who is going to be providing this research and this proposal, and then also to understand how the definition of the dollars to be involved can be guaranteed at this point in time as to be whether or not they will be less or more than this amount. And if they're more than this amount, where does that funding come from? Because in fact, the commission, the Historical Commission and the ADA Commission doesn't have independent funding of to itself. So I'm confused as to how that ties together in terms of you've identified the team that's going to do that, but I don't understand how that can be the team that we're voting to put in place when we haven't gone through the process of, in fact, appropriately selecting them through the process that town government has to go through with respect to awarding contracts, consulting contracts.
Sure. Thank you, Ken. Yeah, it's a great question and a fair question. So we based this approach on a review of other projects that town departments had applied for with this commission. So we reviewed a project that you funded, which was about document preservation, and it was applied for by the town assessor's office. And at that point, you know, you do have to start somewhere. So you have to start with a concept of work, which has to come from people who are deeply familiar with the work and are expert in the work. And as with that proposal, that was a tremendous success for this committee, the scope was prepared by a vendor, and it was understood that this would go out to bid, and there might actually be another vendor that would come in and meet the scope. And that the town would have to select, you know, you have to select the most responsive and responsible party. So that being said, I do think some of these projects are below $10,000. Obviously, we're not going to be doing any kind of serial bidding, but if it is a complete discrete portion, we have a different level of procurement that we have to go to. We're going to follow whatever is, we're not going to make assumptions about what we have to do. We're going to consult with Brian Turbot about that. But I do think it is important for this committee to understand that while we brought together highly skilled, competent, and in some cases, as with PIN, unique entities, PIN brings a level of expertise that will be unmatched by anybody else who might want to bid on this project. They're also, I hope you recognize that even though it is an over $85,000 application, which is a lot of money, for the work that we propose to do, it's actually a fairly small amount of money compared to what other plans cost. So we tried to find deeply experienced partners who could specify the work so that it can then go out to bid, recognizing that other people may want to bid on it, and that we are not, we're coming to you with a proposal, and we wanted to include all of the partners so that they could answer questions and give you confidence in the thought that went into the proposal. But if you award this grant, you're awarding it to the project, and you're awarding it to the applicant, which is the NHC and the ComDis. And it is true that the providers might change depending on procurement, and that will only be for the benefit of this committee because the procurement process is a public protection. Does that answer your question, Ken?
Yep, thank you. Other questions from committee members?
I got questions.
Linda.
I agree with Ken, and just so you know, you cannot take a project and split it into smaller pieces under 10 grand and get around the RFP. So I'll go there. I agree with Mark about why isn't the town funding this? It's part of the streets and byways. It's part of the sidewalk improvements, et cetera, et cetera. I was on ComDis, as Mickey knows, for probably almost 28 years, starting in the early 80s. And we had to pay for those curb cuts out of the 25 grand we went after a town meeting every year until the town finally got a grip on it and said, these are their streets and they need to pay for it. You can't touch a sidewalk or a street under state law without making it handicap accessible. I'd worked very closely with Tom Hopkins, the late director of the AAB, and he grew up here. I knew him when we were kids. He was disabled, and he said, do the best you can on Main Street without destroying Main Street, raising the curbs, raising the street, raising buildings. I mean, he was very realistic about access on Main Street, the commercial part of Main Street in particular. Granted, we have issues going up Main Street on both sides because of the trees and driveways and everything else. Are you aware that Dan Malloy and Mike Burns had started a rather extensive survey of the same area? I have the plan. That was kiboshed when Rob came in, who didn't agree with a lot of their findings. They never completed it. A lot of that has already been done as far as surveying and where levels are, et cetera. Better served, continue with independent contractor with the town, then starting this all over again. It was a great presentation, went on longer than any other applicant we've ever had. A lot of it is irrelevant to what the CPC has to base their decisions on. So I'm a little troubled by that. I'm troubled by a lot of this. I think it's premature. In addition, we don't really have, I don't care about Chuck, we don't really have a DPW director at the moment. Hopefully we'll get one. And he should be weighing in on this as well, since he's the one who's going to work. I don't think anybody that was presenting today is actually physically doing the work. So I think it's premature. I think we need to build on what Dan Malloy and Mike Burns were running down. Whether you've seen that plan or not, I don't know. So I have a totally different take on this. While we need to get a grip on Main Street and those sidewalks, especially to make a clear path of travel, I don't think this is appropriate at the moment. I think it should come back with a more fleshed out cost, because I don't see the basis of the costs that you have put in at the moment compared to other applications that we've had. I appreciate the team, a lot of which I know or have worked with in the past on various projects. But I don't care about that, because this has to bid. Even at 85,000, it has to go out to bid. If they want to apply, that's great. But again, you cannot parse it out to stay under the RFP requirements. I've dealt with them many times. You've also got prevailing wage. So you have a lot of things that are going on because it's a town project. And I do believe the Historical Commission is still part of the town. It has to follow the same rules and regs that every other board in the town has had to follow. You've named a couple of other things we've given money to in the town. We've given the money to the town many times, particularly the Parks and Rec. Those were different. There was different management. There was different accountability, reporting statutes. We've had battles before you ever got here, sorry, about accountability of town projects to the CPC and our reporting requirements to the DOR. So I am not predisposed towards this project at this time. There are too many variables and there's too much unknown, and we would be sort of departing from the requirements of every other applicant that we've had. Thank you.
Questions, comments?
Can
Yes.
I want to address just a very quick thing. I'm going to let Hillary address the more critical, the more financial elements. I respect and like Linda, of course, but I do want to make it clear that this is a plan for the protection of what we have while enabling its use. We don't want to change its historic character, obviously, and we really understand the authenticity of what we have and the importance of using actual materials. And to what Diane said, we don't want to replicate what was done downtown with new materials. We really do want to make it, to keep Nantucket what Nantucket is, work with building with Nantucket in mind. I'll let Hillary talk about the financial issues that we address. But what we're providing is a blueprint for the methodology of how this work can be done whenever and wherever it's needed, and whenever and wherever the financing is available for it, and obviously with no intent to go around any RFP requirements.
Mr. Chair, just a question for you. Maybe you can answer this. In reference to Linda's concern, what would be the difference from the town affiliation with Nantucket Affordable Housing Trust and Nantucket Historical Commission? Do we have to, I know there are two different departments, one for affordable housing and the other in historical preservation, but how do we look at the differences as far as qualifications of the applicant?
Well, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund is different because it is an entity that is designed to be able to deal with funding and doing actual work of the community. The problem with respect to the CPC funding is that the CPC funding can't be utilized to do what the town would be responsible to do. So the question with respect to this application is that is a survey something that is appropriately able to be funded by the CPC, and I've made a determination that it is, based on my review of the act and based on what we've done in the past. So that the funding with respect to a study to provide a plan is clearly within the scope of what the CPC can do. But with respect to any funding for the actual implementation, that cannot be done by the CPC, because that's a responsibility of the town. And the act clearly says CPC funding cannot be used to be substituted for funds or actions that are the responsibility of the town to do.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Right. Other comments or questions at this point in time? From any of the other commissioners who have not spoken before? I do not see any. Mark, go ahead.
Thank you. I think this will be an extremely controversial project. I think the minute you begin going up Main Street, probably past the Pacific National Bank, and making it even close to ADA compatible, it's going to be a lot of people are going to be concerned about it and probably opposed to it. It's got to maybe get by town meeting, maybe not. Maybe the DPW can put it in their budget, but it's going to be, I think, very expensive. I'd be curious to know if you have any idea what it would cost to do from the Pacific Club to the Civil War Monument. I suspect it will be hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm just concerned this project would open up a lot of concerns with Nantucket historic preservation. And you guys are going to try and change it and change Main Street, look and feel Upper Main, which is, I mean, I walk that all winter. I live in town, and I just think it would be a shame to try and make that into what has been done on Lower Main, from the High Line to the Pacific Club. It would be, I think, very sad to do that.
So that's part of why the Historical Commission is the right commission to have involved to tackle this problem. The idea that we should have a completely inaccessible sidewalk that, you know, elderly people who live on the street cannot pass. I live on Main Street, so I'm very familiar with the problems on Main Street and very familiar with the beauty of Main Street. And standing in my driveway, saying hello to an elderly friend who was walking down the street, he looked up to wave to me and tripped and fell and cracked his front tooth, and he still does not have a front tooth because of what happened to him. So the idea that we should just live with this and that this is acceptable and it's totally insolvable, I don't see how as a community we can stand for that. I mean, that it goes against every principle of the Commission on Disability, which is access, and it goes against the mission of the Select Board, which is to encourage walking and encourage a walking town. So I'm currently getting a degree in preservation studies. I'm a student of preservation. We have many people on our commission who are deeply committed to preservation. We work with the Historic District Commission. We're certified local government together with them. The idea that these sidewalks are supposed to be crooked and that they're not authentic if they're straight. I mean, the sidewalks were built to be straight. The materials are durable, permanent quality materials that deserve to be put together correctly to function the way they were designed to function, the same way a building deserves to be put together correctly. There is so much deferred maintenance on this street. So the town wants to fix the street. And yes, Linda, I have all the plans that you referred to. None of them deal with Upper Main Street. This is all new work. And I really, really hope, not everyone is going to agree that this is the highest priority project or that it's feasible or whatnot. We don't all have to agree. But I certainly hope that this committee will honor the right of everybody to be able to use this public sidewalk, and will recognize that the reason why it's been decades of nothing happening on Main Street is because it's a very difficult problem that deserves and needs and requires a multidisciplinary approach with talented people committed to do the work. That if we have the funding, we will be able to deliver a plan to the town that is supported by the community to do what can be done when it can be done to actually fix the street. And without this sort of restoration and rehabilitation plan, this street will not get fixed. And I just don't see how we can accept that as a community.
Yeah. In view of the timeline, if I will only entertain any new comments from either the committee or the presenter. Is there anything that has not been said before that someone feels is critical to be able to be said now?
And can I just add one quick comment? And I think that, to Mark's point, I do think that the town has an obligation to make this street accessible. But when you look at the team involved in this project, every one of them on this team has a historical background in regarding Nantucket and preservation, including myself. And I think we're all, a high priority for this project is going to be to make the streets retain their historical character. So I don't see this as something that's going to be bad for Main Street. I think it's going to be good for Main Street. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Tim Savarino?
Yes, Tim.
I would just like to follow up on Mark's comment as well. It's a very simple question. Have you all asked the town to fund this study? It's just a yes or no question. Have you even asked the question?
We have not asked the town to fund this type of rehabilitation study. No, we have not.
So to follow up on that, if I could we ask you to put that request in writing to the town and report back to us? We have a rather tight window of opportunity for you here, but if you could submit an email or a letter to the town and request this, maybe we could have an answer on that before we make our deliberations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I can write. Ken, that's not a problem, right? I can write to the town manager.
Yep. And we need an answer. By Friday the 9th. Okay. Because the 11th is a holiday and the 12th is the start of our deliberations. Any other questions or comments from any other committee members? I'm not trying to cut anybody off. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Then I would thank the presenters for a very, very detailed and lengthy presentation. I would ask that you guys leave the meeting, and I would ask the committee members to stay on for literally about 2 minutes for me to give an update to you for your deliberations.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Right. Are we only committee members now, Glenna?
That is correct.
Okay, the only thing that I wanted to give you, I've done a rough back of the envelope discussion with Brian Turbot and some of the people at finance. It looks like we're going to have about $3,400,000.
Ken, I'm sorry. Did you want me to pause the recording?
No.
For this portion? Okay.
Nope. Nope. It looks like we're going to have about $3,400,000 through the the CPC surcharge, the estimated amount that we expect to get from the state, and the amount that we will earn on interest. And it looks like we have about a little bit over close to $130,000 in the open space category that could be added to that, but only for the open space part of it. And we have absolutely peanuts with respect to either historic preservation or the other category in terms of reserves. We have in the memo I will detail, we have about $1.6 million in reserves. So the fact is that we always like to keep $1 million. So there is a possibility of, if we wanted to go into using any of the uncommitted reserves this year, we would be able to access up to $600,000. But that is something that we have not done very often in the past. We did it last year to wipe out a couple of the long-term grants. And the other thing is that at this point in time, I'm only aware of 2 commitments that we have going forward. One is $350,000 with respect to the mortgage payment relative to the first CPC, this first Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And in terms of talking to Glenna and Kathy, they're going to make a proposal that we allocate $147,500 for administration this year, up from $125,000 for last year, to address concerns with respect to potential increases in rent and a situation with respect to compensation. So those are the only 2 things that I'm aware of at this point in time that should be factored in to the amount taken as a deduction against the amount of monies that we would have available moving forward. Any questions relative to that? And I will have a detailed memo to you by the end of this week once I get final numbers from Bob Dickinson and Brian Turbot. No questions. I would then entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Linda, seconded by Mark. All those in favor by roll call. God, where's my agenda? Okay, John.
Aye.
Tim.
Yes.
Diane. Mark.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Dawn.
Aye.
Me.
Jack.
Aye.
And Ken says aye. Did I miss anybody?
Yeah.
Linda.
Linda.
Yeah.
And Ken. Ken says aye. All right. Thanks very much. Again, remember, our next meeting starts at 9 o'clock on November 12th. So get your thoughts together.
Is it November or October?
I'm sorry, October 12th. Yes. Yeah, okay.
October, yeah.
Yeah, October 12th, because we
Yeah,
have to have
October
it by
12th.
the end of the month.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing too is I will prepare a couple of sheets to get around so that we can get the appropriate 15 signatures because our warrant article is a citizen's article. So I'll be coming around to get signatures from you guys. So thank you very much.
Ken, before you go, is October 12th the day we decide how to spend our money?
We start on
That's
we
the
spend
beginning.
October 12th and October 13th. We spend a good portion of October 12th talking about the pros and cons with respect to each ones. And we make, the way that we do it, Mark, is we make a motion for an initial allocation in an area that we vote on. And then at the end of the day, we see what that total is and whether or not where we are relative to it, what sort of problems we have with respect to it. Sometimes we can get it done in one day, but usually our experience is it takes the second day to be able to give thought to and figure out how to be able to come up with the right number that we're all comfortable with.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Nope.
All right. Thanks everyone for this morning. I apologize that it ran as long as it did, but at some point in time, I got sick and tired of hearing the same thing over again. So, well, it is a very important project. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.